Well, folks, it is Friday, but we don't have our normal Friday guest here. That's Dr. Robert Heineman. He will be back with us on Monday. Today we have another kind of doctor, Dr. Spence Annabel, who is, of course, an MD. We're going to be talking a little bit about the St. James situation. Stay tuned.
Next on News Talk, AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran.
So welcome to our Friday edition of the Newsmaker Show. I am not in the studio today, Dr. Annabel is. I'm on the phone. The bad back that was good for a while has gotten bad again, so I'm sitting home in I'm actually in my own bed because I can't stand up and I can't sit up. So here we are. Hope to be all better by the first of the week. Dr. Annabel, you asked to come in today because you're concerned about people having a misunderstanding about the status at St. James right now. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. One of the things that's happening, we were all set to move forward last April when our New Vision Task Force ended. We had the mix of outpatient services and limited number of inpatient beds in maternity. And then the state health department stepped in and said, stop, we're starting all over again, doing your community needs assessment. And that drifted on into summer, which drifted into fall, at which point they said they did not feel inpatient beds would be sustainable in Hornell. And that's, of course, got a number of people very upset, and myself included. And I have to applaud the mayor for his efforts to try to restore this service to Hornell. Whether that will work or not remains to be seen. The problem with inpatient care at Hornell, 63% of St. James inpatient care is Medicare and Medicaid. The Medicaid pays 86 cents on the dollar, the Medicare 89 cents. So no matter how many admissions we have from that 63% of our income pool, we lose money on each one. And right now, the state is subsidizing us through the IAF funding and the DSRIP funding in the not-too-distant future. When that funding runs out, the only way St. James could retain inpatient beds and probably OB would be if the state were to continue to subsidize us. And given the current economic conditions, that's kind of a long shot at best, but I wish the mayor well with his quest to try to retain these services. Each town or little city wants to retain everything they can. One of the difficulties this has put St. James in, and this is why I'm here today, our next community meeting will be December 4th at the main place. But until then, I think, people are concerned what's happening, where are things going. Employees know we're going to be downsizing. They know that, and are a number looking for other jobs. And why wouldn't you if you're 40 to 50 years old? You've got to work a long time. And the challenge has been maintaining the four major areas of service at St. James, maintaining the emergency room, the operating room, the obstetrical ward, and the med-surg wards. And through good use of scheduling and a dedicated core of personnel, we've been able to maintain all four areas. And the medical staff leadership, the hospital board of directors administration is very aware of the strategies we need to be using right now to maintain service in those areas. And the state health department expects us to keep all four of those open until we reorganize. The next big milestone is probably going to be March 31st. At that point, we'll be moving forward, and the St. James, as we know it today as a corporation, will cease to exist, and will be U of R, Strong South, or whatever the new name is, and the new mix of services, as far as I can tell, will be pretty much finalized at that point. They have told us to continue to leave our bid in for a grant for the new building up at the McCauley site between McCauley and the Route 36. And the problem is right now retaining our staff to continue our present mission until we transform on March 31st. And a number of patients will say, gee, Doc, is St. James safe to go to? Gee, I don't know. Maybe if I'm having some chest pain or some cardiac issue, maybe I better go somewhere else. Well, number one, if I was having acute coronary today, I'd call 911, and they would take me to St. James, where I would be thoroughly evaluated. Our emergency room is very good. I wouldn't have a moment's hesitation to go there if I was having an acute coronary syndrome or heart attack for lay purposes. And what people need to understand is cardiac care has totally changed. Back in the old days, you had a heart attack, I'd admit you up to the ICU, you'd be sick as a dog for 3 or 4 days with your heart attack, a part of the heart would die, and we'd treat you with pain medications, oxygen, and diuretics if you went into heart failure. Nowadays, you go to the city, and if it's going to be very long, you're given clot-busting drugs here, sent to the city, U of R, Rochester General, or occasionally Guthrie, and you are given an immediate cardiac cath. They find out what the problem is. If they can fix it with a stent, they do so. Most of the time that's the case. Or if you need emergent coronary bypass surgery. So people need to be aware. St. James Emergency Room has still done a great job. I would go there myself with any acute medical or surgical emergency. The inpatient unit is still taking good care of people. And the other thing we need to do, we're all rushing out and signing the petitions, myself included. I have one in my office. All my patients are signing it. And I truly hope we do retain inpatient services, but I'm also a hardened old realist, having been a physician for over 40 years, and if they are retained in Hornell, they can only be financially retained with some form of state subsidy. That being said, our challenge right now is maintaining the institution we've got, and it's like when the new Walmart comes to town or the new Lowe's or whatever. If you want your local brand to continue to function, you have to use it. So I'm encouraging all the citizens of our listening area, especially the citizens of Hornell, Canisteo, Arkport, to continue to have confidence and use the hospital. Now, I would say, in the new plan going forward, people say, well, what's going to be, what are we pretty sure we're going to get? I think we're going to be very sure we're going to get a good outpatient ambulatory unit. We're going to get what's called a freestanding ER, and there's been a lot of confusion about what does that mean. Is it off in the Walmart parking lot or, down in Canisteo or whatever? A freestanding ER works as follows. The hospital will go out of business on March 31st unless there's some huge change in state plans and they get even slower than they are now. When that happens, the emergency room will continue to operate in place where it is, but if an emergency room is not physically in an inpatient admitting hospital, it's called a freestanding ER, and the ground has already been broken for this in Brockport, New York. U of R opened a freestanding ER there. It means an ER not part of an inpatient hospital service, and it has to have a relationship with an adjacent hospital where if you're admitted, you may need to go. The good news is, and it looks quite likely, we'll get ER holding beds, which can keep you for up to 2 days, sometimes a little longer, with an acute illness, and that will allow us to meet a portion of our inpatient need in the community. So that is a very good thing. We're going to retain outpatient and ambulatory surgery. OB, we don't know yet, but that's the same subsidy problem that inpatient admissions are going to be forced. If we lived in a wealthier county, inpatient admission could pay its own way, but when only 36% of your patients are either self-pay or have insurance that the hospital might turn a profit on, and 66% of them you're losing money in every one, the dollars just aren't there. So that being said, any questions, Kevin?
Well, yeah, now you know that Dr. Collins and Dr. Izzy Mayer were on my program, I don't know how many weeks ago, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and they have a group there of doctors who signed onto the concept that we want an OB, we want operating rooms, at least 2 suites, we want inpatient beds, and, of course, we want the ER. And they say anything less than that is just not going to be a real hospital as far as they're concerned. Where do you stand on that? Did you sign that? Did you sign on to that position that those doctors took?
I signed their petition. I sympathize entirely with them. I hope that we get to keep everything they want. But again, as I said earlier, I'm a pretty bitter, hardened old realist, and the trouble is we don't have the money to pay for it. St. James went broke March 31st, 2014. We've been getting by on state aid, if you will, kind of like the school districts do. And unless the state of New York is willing to pay the subsidy to keep those services in Hornell, or somebody else is, the financial reality is, as much as we want them, I don't see how somebody's got to pay the bill at the end of the day. And if that's not New York State, we can't do it alone. It's not financially viable. It would drag the rest of the operation into bankruptcy eventually, because you lose money on 63% of the inpatient work. So if somehow the governor of New York, the legislature decided St. James should be allowed to, well, whatever the new corporation is, U of R South, whatever it's going to be called, it won't be St. James, but if the institution Hornell were to keep inpatient beds, it's going to have to be subsidized on a daily basis from the state health department. And given where the state health department is right now, they've taken a pretty hard stand against that. Now, maybe if 30,000 local citizens sign a petition saying this is what we want, they may listen, but in reality, it's out of our local hands, except for what we can influence politically at this point.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute, and at that time I'm going to ask Dr. Annabel, in the last analysis, won't this really be political? And also, who decided that the present building, St. James on Canasteel Street, is inadequate? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Back with Dr. Spence Annabel. He's in the studio. I'm home. Not that far away, about 100 yards, really. But that's why I sound far away, and he sounds like he's right there, because he is right there. Dr. Annabel, let's take the second question first. Who decided that that building is not adequate? I'm talking about the present St. James. Who decided that wouldn't work? Was there a structural engineer involved in that, or was it just people who work in hospitals deciding it wouldn't work?
There's two answers to that question. The New Vision Task Force looked hard at that. I've worked in that building since 1976. I love that building. I personally, for selfish reasons, want to finish my career there and never leave. But the New Vision Task Force looked at it, and it's so much bigger than what we will be needing in the future, or actually need now. And it's old. The oldest parts were the old farmhouse in the corner, pre-1890. The newest part was finished in 1989, 1990. All the structural systems in that building are old. Much of it's beyond its useful life. So we did a hard, cold financial analysis as New Vision Task Force. Would it be cheaper to go new or stay where we are? And we found it would be significantly cheaper to go new. Now, U of R, we're just the local Hornell people, what do we know, did the entire analysis over themselves. And what they found was to stay in place and renovate the current building, which is laid out to be an old-fashioned inpatient hospital and not the physical plant we need now, it would cost, after renovations, which would be extensive, it would cost $2 million more a year to operate out of that building. So that's how the decision to go to a new building was made. Okay,
now let's go back to the political issue. As you know, as well as I do, in the last analysis, everything that happens in a political system has a political side to it. Sean Hogan has great contacts with the state of New York. He's the Democratic chairman for the county. Andrew Cuomo, as you may have noticed, is a Democrat. He has a lot of pull up there. That, coupled with, I don't know how many people have signed this petition, but let's assume we get 30,000. Seems like they could do that. Won't that have an effect on the governor? And won't he pick up a phone, we all hope, and call the state health department and say, look, I want that place to stay open. I'm going to run down there myself and take the credit for it. Fine, let him do it. That's a real possibility, isn't it?
It's a possibility, but New York State, under this DSRIP and IAAF funding thing that we're now existing on, the IAF part, got $8 billion from the federal government to reform our health care system. And the folks that pay this money will view St. James retaining inpatient services as a step backwards and aren't going to want to finance it. The other thing is, you think of the politics. The election is now over. The pressure on Cuomo to do something to get goodwill and votes might bode well for his presidential bid, which I'm sure is coming down the road. But the acute pressure, if the election's over, is reelected. If anybody can get this deal done for Hornell, it's Sean Hogan. There's nobody that draws more water in Albany than Sean Hogan. He's listened to, he's respected up there. And I wish him well, but my own personal feeling is I think it's a long shot.
Okay, let's go back to the issue of the ER somewhere in North Hornell, well, near Macaulay Manor. Let's suppose now that, God forbid, we have a friend of ours who's developing symptoms for a heart attack. And he knows that if he goes to the ER, they're going to hold him and subsequently send him, to Noyes, probably? Why wouldn't he just go right by St. James and go to Noyes if it's only an ER?
Well, I'll tell a story. Years ago, I don't know how many years ago, the sheriff of Chemung County was having a heart attack. He knew the signs and symptoms, so he said to his wife, drive me to the hospital, which was probably 15 miles away. And this is back before 9/11 system is as good as it is now. He stopped talking to her partway on the trip, slumped over, and of course you can't drive the car and do CPR on your husband, and he was DOA. Any of us having acute coronary syndrome today, the acute stages of a heart attack, chest heaviness, pressure, diaphoresis, nausea, shortness of breath, a feeling of really being uneasy, all the symptoms of acute heart attack. The best thing any of us could do is dial 911, and we are blessed in Hornell to have a highly qualified fire department with advanced EMS guys.
Excellent department there, excellent.
They come in, they put in IVs. If you cardiac arrest en route, they'll defibrillate you, they'll get your heart started again, do all the critical things that have to be done. And it's just not worth taking the chance of the trip in a car to the emergency room when you can take that same trip with very highly qualified gentleman that I would trust my own life to. And Frank Brzezowski's great. His whole crew is great. And then you enter the EMS system, the emergency medical system. And if you're having a heart attack, you're not going to go to Dansville. You're going to go to one of the places in Rochester where they can do an immediate cardiac cath pretty much 24 hours a day and either fix you with a stent or tide you over until you can get an emergency bypass. And the beauty of it is, I've got patients who've had 3 or 4 heart attacks today, treated the way we now treat heart attacks with emergency stent thrombolytic therapy, and I can't find a single scar in their heart, where in the old days they'd have 4 big chunks of their heart that were no longer living and functioning. So there's been a revolution in cardiology in the last 40 years since I've been a physician, and it only works if you get plugged right into the EMS system, get to your nearest ER, get stabilized. If you need to go to a tertiary care center, then you do it.
Dr. Annabel, our time is gone. I think we probably are going to be talking about this whole issue many more times before March. So thank you for being with us.
All right. I would invite everybody to come to the community meeting December 4th at Main Place.